2:47 in the morning. That is when it happens for most of the people who write to this channel about it. Not at 11 at night, not at dawn. Deep in the early morning hours, you wake up and the pillow is damp. The back of your neck is wet, and the sheets on your side of the bed are soaked through. You get up, change your shirt, flip the pillow, and tell yourself the same thing you told yourself last week. The room was warm. The blanket was too heavy. I'm just running hot lately. If you are over 65 and this is happening more than once in a while, I want you to hear something most people are never told. In many cases, that sweat is not a thermostat problem. It is an alarm. Your body has an emergency broadcast system, and one of the loudest signals it can send is a drenching sweat in the middle of the night. And one of the things that can trip that alarm silently while you sleep is your blood sugar. Back in 1979, the Lancet published a study of 39 people with diabetes treated with insulin. 22 of them, more than half, were having overnight drops in blood sugar that nobody had recognized. Not their doctors, not the patients themselves. The clues were night sweats, morning headaches, and dragging fatigue the next day. Mild warning symptoms or none at all, just wet sheets and a bad morning. That study is nearly half a century old, and the blind spot it exposed is still open today. Here is what makes it worse. The standard blood test your doctor runs, the A1C, can come back looking perfectly fine while this is going on night after night. I will show you exactly why that happens. In the next 25 minutes, I'm going to walk you through how to tell a glucose-driven night sweat from an ordinary warm night, why the muscle you have lost since 60 may matter more than the dessert you ate, and one bedtime food sitting in most kitchen cupboards right now that researchers actually tested against overnight sugar crashes. And there is one cause on this list that is not low blood sugar at all. It is the one I am most worried you will miss, so stay with me for that. Here is exactly what this video will give you. Promise number 1 is a 3-part self-check you can run tonight using nothing but a notepad and a clock that helps you sort a metabolic night sweat from a warm bedroom based on timing, on the symptoms that ride along with the sweat, and on what you did in the 6 hours before bed. Promise number 2 is the specific reason the A1C test can miss all of this, straight from 2 published reviews, including one written specifically about older adults with type 2 diabetes. Promise number 3 is that bedtime food I mentioned, tested in a study in the Journal of Internal Medicine, and the very specific caveat that comes with it. Promise number 4 is the muscle connection, why research in the Journal of Cachexia, Sarcopenia, and Muscle suggests that the muscle you lose after 60 and the blood sugar swings you feel at night may be 2 branches of the same tree. And promise number 5 is that sleep condition that produces night sweats and quietly worsens glucose control at the same time, and the 3 signs that tell you to get checked for it. If that sounds worth 25 minutes of your evening, take 1 second now and hit like and subscribe, because it genuinely helps this reach the people who need it. My name is Dr. Vitalis. On this channel, I read the medical research that rarely makes it past the journal paywall and translate it into plain language for adults over 50. I do not sell supplements, and I do not do hype. What I will do is show you the studies, name them out loud so you can look them up, and give you specific questions to bring to your own physician. Let me tell you about Ruth. Ruth is 72. She lives in a brick 2-story in Cleveland that she and her late husband bought in 1989. She has had type 2 diabetes for 11 years, and for the last 4 of those years, she has taken a long-acting insulin in the evening along with a pill for her blood pressure. Ruth is a composite. She is not one real patient, she is a pattern, assembled from the case descriptions in the clinical literature and the letters this channel receives, and I am using her because the pattern repeats with almost mechanical regularity. Ruth's night sweats started in early March. The first time, she blamed the furnace because it had been acting up all winter. The second time, she blamed the new flannel sheets. By the third week, she was waking 2 or 3 nights out of 7, somewhere between 2 and 4 in the morning, with her nightgown stuck to her back. She bought a bedside fan. She switched to a lighter blanket. The sweats continued. What Ruth did not connect, because nobody had ever told her to connect it, were the other things happening on those same mornings. A dull headache behind her eyes when she woke. A heaviness in her arms and legs that lasted until lunch. One morning, her daughter called at 9, and Ruth could not remember the name of her own street for a few seconds. She laughed it off. In April, Ruth went to her regular checkup. Her doctor ran the standard panel, and her A1C came back at 6.8. Her doctor smiled, said the words, "Excellent control," and moved on to her knees. The night sweats did not come up because Ruth assumed they were a bedroom problem, not a blood problem, and the visit lasted 14 minutes. It was not until months later, when a different clinician had her wear a small glucose sensor on her arm for 2 weeks, that the picture appeared. On 5 of those 14 nights, Ruth's blood sugar was sagging into the 50s between roughly 2 and 4 in the morning, then climbing back up before breakfast, so her morning finger stick looked ordinary. Her body had been fighting a small metabolic emergency in the dark several nights a week for most of a year, and the only evidence it left behind was sweat on the sheets and a headache at dawn. And here is why I am telling you about Ruth. Not because she is unusual, because she is typical. The 1979 Lancet finding, more than half of insulin-treated patients with unrecognized overnight lows, tells us that Ruth is not the exception in this story. For adults over 65 on glucose-lowering medication, Ruth may be closer to the rule. So let me explain the mechanism, because once you understand it, you will never look at a soaked pillowcase the same way. In plain English, when your blood sugar falls too low while you sleep, your body treats it as a survival emergency and floods your system with adrenaline to force the sugar back up. That adrenaline surge is what soaks the sheets. A review in Balier's Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism back in 1992 laid out the 2 families of symptoms this produces. The first family comes from the adrenaline itself, the sympathetic surge, sweating, a pounding or racing heart, trembling. The second family comes from the brain running short of fuel, what physicians call neuroglycopenic symptoms. Confusion, grogginess, strange behavior, that morning where the name of your own street slips away for a moment. There is even a case report published in the journal Medicine in 2019 of a patient with type 2 diabetes whose overnight lows produced sweating and behavior so odd during the night that the problem was initially misdiagnosed as something else entirely. Now, why does this happen at night specifically? Because night is when the conditions line up. You have not eaten for hours. Evening medications, particularly insulin and certain older diabetes pills, may be reaching their peak effect in the small hours. Your liver is managing the fuel supply alone, and critically, you are unconscious. Awake, you might feel the early shakiness and eat a cracker. Asleep, you feel nothing until the adrenaline is loud enough to wake you, and sometimes not even then. Sometimes the only witness is the laundry. Here is the part they skip, the part that explains Ruth's excellent checkup. The A1C test, which the NIH and the American Diabetes Association describe as the standard measure for diabetes management, is an average. It reflects roughly 3 months of blood sugar blended into a single number, and an average, by its nature, hides swings. A night that dips into the 50s and a morning that rebounds into the 160s can average out to a number that looks like a gold star. A 2019 review in the journal Diabetes Therapy spelled this out directly. The A1C does not capture short-term glycemic variability, and it does not capture hypoglycemic events. Continuous glucose monitoring can. In a recent review in Diabetes, Obesity, and Metabolism written specifically about older adults with type 2 diabetes went further. It stated that in this exact population, your population, the A1C inadequately captures asymptomatic and nocturnal hypoglycemia. In plain terms, the standard test is weakest at detecting the exact problem that soaks your sheets at 2:47 in the morning. Ruth's 6.8 was not a lie. It was an average telling the truth about the wrong question. Now let me show you 3 more people, because this pattern wears different faces, and I want you to recognize yours if it is here. Frank is 71, a retired machinist outside Dayton. Type 2 diabetes for 9 years, evening insulin for 3. Frank's version of the pattern was built around his dinner schedule. Frank eats supper at 5, because he always has. He takes his insulin at 9, because that is what the bottle says. That is a long, empty runway between his last food and his medication's peak hours. And on the nights he was busy and skipped his usual evening snack, the runway got longer. Frank's sweats clustered on exactly those nights. His wife noticed it before he did. On the nights he had his snack, dry sheets. On the nights he did not, she woke at 3 to a damp mattress and a husband with a racing heart. Frank did not need a lecture about sugar. He needed someone to look at the spacing between his last meal and his medication, and nobody had in 9 years of appointments. Diane is 66, a retired school teacher in Tucson, and Diane is the case that surprises people because Diane has never been diagnosed with diabetes. Her A1C sits at 5.6, just under the line. What Diane has, like tens of millions of American adults according to the CDC's National Diabetes Statistics Report, many of whom have no idea, is blood sugar regulation that is quietly shifting. Pre-diabetes territory. Diane's evenings follow a pattern. A light, early dinner, often just a salad, and 2 glasses of wine. Alcohol can blunt the liver's ability to release glucose overnight, and a small dinner gives the system very little to work with. Diane's sweats were intermittent, maybe once a week, always after wine, always in the early morning hours, always with a thudding heartbeat when she woke. Her physician initially reached for the obvious explanation for a woman her age, lingering hormonal effects, and, to be fair, that was a reasonable place to start. The NIH's Medline Plus resources list menopause as a genuine and common cause of night sweats. But Diane was 15 years past her last hormonal symptom, and the wine pattern in her notebook told a different story. Diane is the reminder that you do not need a diabetes diagnosis for your glucose metabolism to be part of this conversation. And then there is Walter. Walter is 78, lives in Sacramento, and Walter is the case I opened a loop about at the start, because Walter's night sweats were not low blood sugar at all. Walter snores. Loudly, his daughter says, with silences in the middle that end in a gasp. Walter wakes most nights damp with sweat, and he is exhausted by mid-afternoon no matter how early he goes to bed. Walter has obstructive sleep apnea, and here is why he belongs in a video about glucose. A 2025 review in the Chinese Medical Journal laid out how sleep apnea's two signature insults, fragmented sleep and repeated dips in oxygen through the night, increase both the risk and the severity of diabetes. The struggle to breathe drives the same adrenaline surges that soak the sheets, and the broken, oxygen-starved sleep degrades glucose control over time. Animal research points the same direction. A 2016 study in the journal Psychoneuroendocrinology found that disrupting sleep in mice impaired their glucose metabolism, and a high-fat diet made it worse. So Walter's sweat and Walter's creeping blood sugar were not two problems. They were two symptoms of one problem, sitting upstream of both. If Walter only chases the sweat, he misses the cause. 3 faces, 1 lesson. And one more thing before we get practical, because I promised you protective authority, not fear. Night sweats have a long list of causes. The Mayo Clinic's reference on the subject and the diagnostic guidance in the journal American Family Physician both list medications, infections, thyroid conditions, hormonal changes, and more. Nothing in this video tells you which one is yours. What it tells you is that the glucose explanation is on that list. It is common in people over 65, and it is the one most likely to be missed by the standard workup. Your job is not to diagnose yourself tonight. Your job is to gather the evidence that forces the right question. So here is exactly what to do in this order starting tonight. Step 1. Start a 2-week night sweat log and make it specific, because this log is the 3-part self-check I promised you. Part 1 is timing. Every time you wake up sweating, write down the clock time. Metabolic sweats tend to cluster in the same window, often the early morning hours, because that is when medication peaks and fasting troughs line up. A warm bedroom does not keep an appointment. Part 2 is the company the sweat keeps. Note whether you woke with a pounding heart, a headache, trembling, or morning confusion or heavy fatigue. A soaked shirt plus a racing heart plus a dull dawn headache is a very different animal from simply feeling warm. Part 3 is the runway. Write down what time you ate dinner, what you ate, any alcohol, and every medication you took after 5 in the evening with its time. After 2 weeks, look for the pattern the way Frank's wife did. Same window, same companions, same evenings. That page of notes is worth more to your physician than a month of vague complaints. Step 2. Take that log to your doctor and ask one precise question. Say, could these be overnight glucose swings, and would 2 weeks on a continuous glucose monitor tell us? That sentence changes the appointment. It moves you past the average, past the A1C blind spot that the Diabetes Therapy Review and the Diabetes, Obesity, and Metabolism Review both documented, and toward the tool that actually sees the night. Your doctor may also want to rule out the other causes on the Mayo Clinic's list: infections, thyroid, medications, and that is exactly right. Let them. The log makes sure the glucose question gets asked alongside the others instead of never. Step 3. If you take insulin or any pill that lowers blood sugar, review the evening timing with your prescriber. Not with me, not with a forum, with the person who wrote the prescription. Ask whether your dose timing, your dinner hour, and your evening snack habits fit together, or whether, like Frank, you have built a long, empty runway into the middle of your night. And I need to say this plainly. Never adjust insulin or diabetes medication on your own based on a video. The fix here is a conversation, not a unilateral change. Step 4. Protect the muscle you still have, because your muscle is the largest glucose-handling tissue you own, and it is quietly central to this whole story. A 2024 study in the Journal of Cachexia, Sarcopenia, and Muscle identified a protein in aging skeletal muscle that is tied to both age-related muscle loss and impaired glucose tolerance, two problems moving together at the molecular level. Work in the journal Aging Cell in 2023 found that a key muscle regulator declines with age, and that restoring it in animals improved both the muscle wasting and the metabolic dysfunction that travel with aging. The lesson for you is not a drug. It is a direction. Less muscle generally means less room to buffer glucose, and a system with less buffer swings harder. So, with your doctor's okay, 2 simple resistance sessions a week, even seated exercises with light weights or bands, and a 10-minute walk after dinner. For many people, that walk alone smooths the evening glucose curve, and it costs nothing. Step 5. Screen for sleep apnea if any of Walter's 3 signs fit you. Loud snoring, pauses in breathing that someone else has witnessed, or waking with a gasp, and daytime sleepiness that does not match how long you were in bed. Ask your doctor about a home sleep study, which for many people is a single night with a small device done in your own bed. Given what the Chinese Medical Journal review shows about apnea driving glucose problems from upstream, this may be the single highest leverage test on this list for the right person. Now, the cupboard food. In 1999, the Journal of Internal Medicine published a study on people with intensively treated type 1 diabetes, the group at highest risk for overnight crashes. The researchers gave them a bedtime dose of uncooked cornstarch, plain, raw cornstarch, the kind sitting in the baking aisle for a couple of dollars. The result? The cornstarch produced a lower, delayed glucose peak, a slow trickle of fuel released across the night instead of a spike, and it prevented nocturnal hypoglycemia in those patients. The mechanism is almost embarrassingly simple. Raw starch granules digest slowly, so they drip glucose into the bloodstream for hours, right through the window when the tank would otherwise run dry. Uncooked matters, by the way. Cooking the starch changes its structure and speeds the whole thing up. Now, the caveat, and this is not fine print, this is the point. That study was done in insulin-treated type 1 patients under medical supervision. It is not a blanket instruction for every person with damp sheets. It adds carbohydrate to your day, and for some people, it would be exactly the wrong move. So here is how to use this information. Do not go stir cornstarch into milk tonight. Instead, bring the idea to your appointment and ask, given my log and my medications, would a slow-release bedtime snack make sense for me? And what should it be? If your sweats are metabolic, this is the kind of small, boring mechanical fix that can change your nights. If they are not, your doctor just crossed one thing off the list. Either way, you walk out ahead. Let me bring this home, because I want you to understand what is actually at stake here, beyond laundry. Sleep is when your body does its maintenance, and a night interrupted by adrenaline surges is a night of maintenance missed. Researchers running a longitudinal study published in BMJ Open are examining exactly how poor sleep, tangled up with vascular and metabolic disease, contributes to cognitive decline in older adults. and a study in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease found that markers of chronic inflammation were more prevalent in older adults with cognitive impairment. I am not telling you that a sweaty night means anything dire. I am telling you that broken sleep, swinging glucose, and long-term brain health appear to sit in the same web, which means the 2-week log I gave you is not about the sheets. It is about the decade ahead of you. So if you take one thing from these 25 minutes, take this. A recurring night sweat after 65, especially with a pounding heart or a morning headache, especially if you take glucose-lowering medication, deserves a real answer, not a fan and a lighter blanket. The Lancet flagged this blind spot in 1979. 22 out of 39. Do not spend another year on the wrong side of that ratio. Start the log tonight and ask the continuous glucose monitor question at your next visit. And let me be clear about what this video is. It is education, not medical advice. Ruth, Frank, Diane, and Walter are composites built from published patterns, not real patients. Night sweats have many causes, and only your own physician, who knows your history and your medications, can sort out which one is yours. Please talk to them before changing anything, especially any medication. If you live with someone over 65, or you have a parent, a brother, a sister, or a neighbor who has mentioned waking up soaked, send them this video, because the odds are good that nobody has ever told them what that sweat might be saying. And a 2-week notepad log costs nothing. If this was worth your time, hit the like button and subscribe, because that is what tells me to keep making videos like this one. I'm Dr. Vitalis, and I will see you in the next one.